would much rather be there face to face. So hopefully in the near future, I can come and meet those that are tuning in and watching tonight's talk, because there's definitely something from that face to face interaction and hearing people's stories, particularly when we're talking about my field of expertise, which is weight loss. So I'm here to talk to you about the Interval Weight Loss Program. It is a series of books and also an online version. So with the help of the university this year, we released the online version so that people can actually follow it in the palm of their hand from anywhere in the country and across the globe. I'm aware that the books are available for loan at the library. Now, the one on the screen is the second book. There was also Interval Weight Loss, and the latest book is Interval Weight Loss for Women. The reason I don't have the Interval Weight Loss for Women book title cover up is because I don't want the talk to skew towards women. It is for men as well. And even though the latest book is called Interval Weight Loss for Women, I strongly recommend that as a starting point for everyone, because it delves into the 6 principles in detail, which I'm going to talk about, which are those 6 steps to long-term weight loss success. And it also tackles the science, which I'm going to delve into today, but not in a heavy-hitting way. And then obviously it also addresses significant life events that women go through that us men never have to worry about. So pregnancy, menopause, going on the contraceptive pill. So obviously if you're male, you're reading through the book, you can flick through those sections, but it also helps you understand what your partner might be going through. Now, this is the fabulous place that I work. I'm very lucky to work at a state-of-the-art facility here at the University of Sydney and Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in the inner west part of Sydney. It's named after Charlie Perkins, so Charles Perksin Centre. And basically, it's a joint collaboration between these 2 institutions. And downstairs, as you can see on the photo on the left, is our clinic. Now, this is the clinic where we see patients that are struggling with their weight. Now, some of them are, maybe just a few kilos to lose, and others have got 10, 20, 30, maybe 50 plus kilos to lose. But what we're doing is actually painting a better picture, or trying to paint a better picture of what weight management should look like. So we're trialing and testing different products and diets and treatments and surgeries all of the time. And we're seeing thousands of patients every year. And we are Australia's largest obesity weight management service. Now, a large part of my role is to translate what we do, because it's one thing for us to investigate all of these different treatments so that we know what works best, but not only to then, report on those findings, write them up and publish them in peer-reviewed scientific academic journals, but to make sure they get beyond that to the general public, so that the general public gets that information, because otherwise it is stuck in the academic literature. And when it comes to this field that I work in, which is obesity, it is a plethora of different information that you have to navigate through. And there are a lot of people out there capitalizing on other people's misery. It's an industry that's now worth $100 billion. Everyone's a self-proclaimed expert, whether it's wellness, weight loss expert, diet expert. So you've got to know where to go when it comes to evidence-based care. So 2017 brought me to the start of this interval weight loss journey, where I did translate the first stage of that program into the first book. Then came the second book. This year was the third book. And as I mentioned, the online program. There's a variety of different ways in which you can digest this information afterwards. We only have, half an hour for me to talk to you, and also some Q&A at the end. Now, I'm not here to give you a heavy-hitting sciencey talk. I'm here to bring to life my work in a light and fun way, but also put it into perspective for what it might look like for the majority of the population that are out there and struggling with their weight. Now, this is Lachlan, but it could also be Erica or Patricia or Paul. And Lachlan represents the typical life cycle of an adult in the modern developed Western world. So here he is. I want you to think of Lachlan and put yourself in Lachlan's shoes. Now, whether it's your own experience, it could be a friend, a family, a colleague, or it could be a friend or someone you know down the road that's struggling with their weight. And remember that the population statistics now show that 2 in 3 people are struggling with their weight. So this is something that is affecting the majority of us, even if it is only a few extra kilos around the waistline. Now, every day, Lachlan wakes up, a very clever part of his brain called the hypothalamus tells him when and when he shouldn't eat. Now, signals are sent, hormones are sent from his stomach to his brain, telling him when he should start food consumption, and other hormones are produced telling him when he should stop and put down that food or terminate food consumption. It's not just signals from the stomach, but it's also from other organs like his pancreas, his fat tissue, or his adipose tissue. So basically, we've got this clever wiring system between our organs, such as the stomach, the adipose tissue, the pancreas, acting on our brain, that clever part called the hypothalamus, telling us when we should and shouldn't eat. Some of them are, as I just mentioned, telling you to start, and others are telling you to stop. Now, before the 1970s, 1980s, approximately the mid-1970s, this is the time point we refer to, this clever architectural wiring system kept the majority of us in a relatively healthy body weight range. We didn't have a weight problem. Most of us walked around and were in a healthy weight range. Food wasn't everywhere like it is today. We did walk a lot and we were getting pretty good sleep. Our lifestyle was in balance. But then around that time, around the 1970s, something changed. Processed and packaged food became abundant and it was everywhere. Technology and screens were in the palm of our hand and surrounding us 24/7. We started to rely on motor vehicles to get us everywhere from A to B, so we weren't walking as much. So we saw this evolution of what we refer to as an obesogenic environment. Food is everywhere. We have a hard time saying no to it. We keep going back for it even though we're full. We're sitting down, we've got devices in our hands all day, every day, all night, keeping us awake at night. And then, as I mentioned, we're actually getting everywhere from A to B on transport, some form of transport, like a motor vehicle, as opposed to walking and getting a large incidental activity. Now, consequently, Lachlan in this stage, or Erica, whoever it might be that you're, thinking of right now, they start to put on weight. And they put on about 0.5 to 1 kilo every year. So remember, we didn't have this weight problem. Lachlan's going along pretty good. He's got this wiring system between his stomach and his brain. And then the 1970s, 1980s comes around and our environment changes. This obesogenic environment starts to take hold. And Lachlan just can't stop reaching for all of these great favourite delicious foods. Even though his homeostatic regulation between those hormones in his brain's telling him when he should stop, the hedonic or reward pathway keeps kicking in, telling him, oh, those foods, those burgers and the chips, they make me feel good. I need to keep going back for more. Now, slowly but surely, his waistline goes up. And before he knows it, he looks in the mirror and he's put on 10 kilos. Over the course of a decade, not long later, he's put on double that and he's 20 kilos heavier than what he was as a young adult. Now, at the same time, when we started to see this rise in the prevalence of obesity, or the obesity epidemic becoming what it is today, we saw the boom of the dieting industry. Pills, shakes, specially formulated foods, a new diet every day of the week, promising that magic cure that we're looking for. Remember, we're living in this obesogenic environment. We don't have our lifestyle. We're not leading aspects of a healthy lifestyle. Our waistline's growing. So what do we want? We want the quick fix. We've got the wedding around the corner. We've got the special event we want to look good for, or the summer body for the beach. And this clever marketing makes us believe that these companies have the answer. Now, one day Lachlan's sitting at home. He's talking to his wife, and she says, well, the weight's creeping on, and my friend down the road, Patricia, she signed up to a diet, which we'll call Diet X, and she's done great. We went out the other night and celebrated all the weight loss that she's lost in the last few weeks. And now she's been on the diet for a couple of months, and, she's lost 15 kilos. Why don't you give it a go? She seems to have done great. So he sits there and he thinks about it, and reluctantly he thinks, okay, I'll give it a crack. So Lachlan signs up to Diet X too. And guess what? He does great. He also loses weight very quickly. He finds it, easy. He's following the components of this diet, some shakes here and there. He's cutting out some of the foods that he was previously eating. And he also goes out and celebrates, goes out with his wife, and they get together with family, friends, and they have a great time. And he feels wonderful. He's lost that 20 kilos that he'd gradually put on over the last couple of decades. But not long later, he starts to notice that his weight's creeping back on. He's still implementing the principles of this diet. He's still following this diet. He keeps looking at the diet, thinking, what am I doing wrong? Sure, he's had a couple of slip-ups here and there, but it doesn't equate to the amount of weight that he's starting to regain. He's frustrated. And not long later, he notices that he's back to his start point. So he sits down with his wife and he brainstorms what might have went wrong. And she says, well, maybe you just didn't stick to the diet. Maybe it was just, the relapses you had here and there. And that if you sign up again, this time you need to commit to it long term. So guess what? He signs up to the same program again, signs up to Diet X again, because he did well the first time. And sure, he loses weight, but guess what? He goes back to the start point again. So he starts to move through the dieting industry. He tries other diets. He starts to try some pills and some of these late night advertising products. And Lachlan, just like Erica and Patricia and Paul, have been on 5 diets every year. And we know from data that by the age of 45, Lachlan's been on 60 plus diets and will spend 31 maddening years of his life dieting. And this is what it looks like for him every single time. He loses, he regains. He loses, he regains. He loses, he regains. And if you have been on a dieting journey, you will relate to this story. Now, the worst thing about all of this is he's not just going back to the start point. He's not just putting on the 0.5 to 1 kilo every year that he was putting on before he started this dieting escapade. He's actually starting to put on more. He might lose, say, 8 kilos, 9 kilos, or whatever it might be, but he ends up putting 9, 10, 11 back on. He ends up overshooting every single time. So previously, his set point was the 100 kilos. He gradually increased. Remember, he put on 20 kilos over a couple of decades. He worked up to 100. And he'd go on a diet. he'd reduce it, but it'd always come up a little bit higher. And that set point, that weight that his body always protects, well, that's the weight that he always goes back to. But due to this process known as fat overshooting, he actually ends up a little bit heavier. So he doesn't just go back to 100, he goes back to 101, then 102. And instead of putting on the zero 0.5 to 1 kilo every year, he ends up putting on the 1 to 1.5 to 2 kilos every year. So all he's doing is actually accelerating his weight gain and dieting himself fatter and fatter. The worst thing is, it's not just the extra weight that he's putting on. Remember that wiring system that I talked to you about at the start? Well, he disturbs that. He mucks up his equilibrium. So that wiring system between his brain and his stomach, well, when he loses weight, hormones are released telling him to eat more. They're basically going into survival mode to say, hang on, you're starting to lose weight that you need in order to survive and procreate. So therefore, ghrelin levels, which is a hormone that goes up telling you to eat more, skyrockets, significantly goes up. He feels ravenous. He keeps reaching for all the foods. But even after he starts to put the weight on and after he's regained it, well, his ghrelin levels don't go back to where they were at the start. They remain elevated. So even though he's regained the weight, his appetite hormones are still telling him to eat more food, to go back for more food, and to keep shoveling more and more into his body. So what he's feeling is not a subjective increase in appetite, it's an objective response. Those hormones, when we measure them in patients, have actually changed. Now, this is just one of the well-researched biological pathways that kick into gear when we lose weight. The latest book, The Interval Weight Loss for Women, goes into all 8 in detail because there is 8 well-researched or physiological responses that take place when we lose weight. And it's beyond the depth of this talk to be able to go into each one in detail, but I will also talk about one other one because another one we love to talk about is our metabolism. We often sign up to a program and then we say, or we talk to our friends and we say, I'm struggling with age to lose weight now because my metabolism's slow or my thyroid function's not good. Well, just like the appetite hormones that Lachlan's been playing around with this weight loss cycling, his metabolism also changes. So when he loses weight, his metabolism goes down. Now, we would expect that because he's losing body mass. So when you have less mass, you burn less energy. But even after we account for that drop in body mass, that decrease in fat and decrease in muscle that he's lost, there's a further 15% drop that us scientists can't account for. Again, it's just the body's response to weight loss. It's the survival mechanism kicking into gear, saying, hang on, I need to shut down as much as possible to go back to the start point, to go back to my set point. And not only that, when I get back there, again, just like the appetite hormones, the metabolism doesn't go back to its start point. It stays lower. So you continue to burn less energy at rest. And so you fat overshoot and you put on a little bit of extra weight. And that's the body preparing for the next bout of starvation that you're going to put it through. Now, you might be wondering why it's doing all of this. Well, it's due to our ancestors. We would often go long periods of time as hunter-gatherers without food, hours, days. And then when it was available, we would gorge at the sight of it. We would store that food. When it wasn't available, our body would then shut down again. So what's happened is you put our ancestors' genes, which have not changed over time, despite the fact that we like to talk and blame genes, into the modern day environment, and you have this evolutionary mismatch. So you have that interaction between the genes and the environment, meaning that our weight goes up. We can't say no to all those foods. we're not moving, we get poor sleep, we react by dieting, which only compounds our issue even more. So, like I said, for all of that information, more detail on those eight well-researched physiological responses that take place when you lose weight or when you go on a diet or one of these 4, 8, 12-week online programs, that's what's happening within your body. And this is why you go back to your start point. Now, just before I move on to the next bit, there's also a great paper you can look up where it looks at, or a wonderful study where it looked at 4,000 sets of twins. Now, what they did was they simply looked at the twin, one set of group, which were the dieters, the others, the non-dieters, and what they found was the twin that had dieted throughout their lifetime was always heavier than the twin that hadn't. So it was obviously independent of genetic factors, again, supporting that factor that dieting can, in essence, actually just accelerate weight gain and take you from a normal weight to an overweight, or even to then a state of obesity. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, which is good news. Now, Lachlan is sitting there at home one day and he's tried everything. He's signed up to all these programs. He's tried these programs multiple times. There's nothing that he hasn't tried. And he's brainstormed with his wife and he's basically given up. He's sitting there on the couch and he's come to the fact that this is the weight that he's going to have to live with because he's sick and tired of dieting. Not only from a physical perspective has he suffered, but also a mental perspective. He now has a negative relationship with food. And he's developed body image disorders because a lot of those diets that he'd been following had been telling him to take out certain foods, certain food groups, because they were bad for him. He now doesn't know what to eat, what to put in his body, how to manage his weight. He feels guilty whenever he puts anything into his mouth. He's sitting there and he's watching the TV and Dr. Nick comes on the screen and he learns about the interval weight loss program. But importantly, he learns why he's been failing on his weight loss attempts all this time. And that it wasn't due to a lack of willpower, but it was actually due to his biology. Remember, not his genes. This is his biology, the physiological responses that take place within Lachlan's body, Erica's body, Patricia's, Paul's, when you lose weight. Every time he'd signed up to a diet, he learns that he was doomed for failure because his body would just go into shutdown, kicking that fight or flight response in order to take him back to that set point or starting point. He also learns that new research shows you can lose weight and prevent the regain by losing weight in 4-week cycles. Now, he sort of thinks, I don't know, I want to lose the weight now, but I've tried everything and it hasn't worked long term, so I have nothing to lose. So he digests the information, he uses his online program, and he makes himself accountable. He learns that he's allowed to lose roughly 2 kilos every second month. Now, over the course of his lifetime, he always found it pretty easy to lose weight. But as he's gone on and as the years have accumulated, he's found that weight loss has become harder and harder. And that's because his body has become better at shutting down, at eliminating that stress, and identifying that a diet or weight loss is not the route that he wants to go down. So he's told to set a goal that's focused on health. He goes to his GP, gets some bloods done, gets a cholesterol and diabetes check for his glucose level, blood pressure, and he uses those as the start point. Because if his weight's not budging, he'll then be able to determine whether his health's improving along the way. Anyway, he signs up, and sure, he loses weight. It's never picture perfect, but he goes on the journey, and he loses the rough 2 kilos. And then the hard part that he finds is the maintenance, because he gets excited by the number on the scales going down. Just like all of us, when we jump on the scales, we want to see it go down. But when he's told that he has to put the foot on the brake and take the foot off the accelerator every second month, he finds that hard to comprehend because he wants to just keep going. But he trusts in the science and the principles behind the plan, because look where he is. And look what he got from every other attempt. Now, some of these months are not picture perfect. Some of the maintenance months, he does lose a little bit, but he tries to correct it and prevent it from going down further. Some of the weight loss months, his body holds on to the weight and he might only lose 0.5 or 1 kilo. But again, they're the periods where he does focus on health and uses that as an indicator of change over time. But all in all, he's monitoring the trend over time. Roughly the 2 kilo down, maintenance, 2 kilo down, maintenance, 2 kilo down. But like I said, it's not picture perfect, but he does lose roughly 12 kilos over the first year, which is what the IWL plan prescribes. And then he loses that goal 20 kilo weight loss over the course of a couple of years. And he also learns that when he's imposing these breaks every second month, he doesn't have that body's usual response to weight loss. He doesn't have the change in appetite hormones telling him to eat more. He feels in control. He doesn't have the metabolism lowering, which ensures he burns less energy at rest. So he's actually redefining his set point at intervals along the way. Whereas previously, he would lose that weight, but he'd get that typical V-shaped response that I showed you. And he would feel that uncontrollable appetite kick in after a few kilos of weight loss. Now, why a couple of kilos, you might be asking? Why are we losing 2 kilos in 4 week cycles? Because 2 to 3 kilos is what we consider clinically significant. This is the weight loss where beyond that amount is when your body starts to work differently. When you might start to see that change or decrease in metabolism, the increase in ghrelin levels telling you to eat more. So to keep within a safe range, he keeps to the 2, maximum 3 kilos every second month, goes on his merry way. And how does he do it? He does it by following these 6 steps. Now, this is a downloadable resource that's publicly available. And like I said, there's so many different ways of digesting this information via the books, the websites, the mobile web app. But it is something that he always kept on the fridge, so it was visible to him at all times. Now, these 6 principles are based on what evidence shows are the key steps for long-term weight loss success. So we've obviously got the methodology where we're losing weight in 4-week intervals, imposing breaks every second month. But we're also addressing those things that Lachlan had great difficulties with. The food addiction. He learns that you can retrain your brain to go back to nature's treats because they give us the same feel-good response in the brain as the processed and packaged foods. And they're the foods that our ancestors used to get that feel-good or high response from. They still got that high we're looking for from food, but they got it from nature's treats. And he learns that it doesn't happen overnight, but that plasticity of the brain does exist, and that if you consistently apply those positive choices, eventually over time, they become the way of life. But he's not cutting out his favourite foods altogether. That doesn't work, the all or nothing approach. And it's another one of those biological pathways that kicks into gear. When you do kick out all of your favourite foods, your brain wiring changes to make you go back for more of them, and then you overindulge. So he still includes his favourite treats once a week on the weight loss months, and on the weight maintenance months, he has a couple of them every week. Now, the other refreshing thing that he learns is that he doesn't have to count calories. He doesn't have to sit down and meticulously weigh out 60 grams of chicken with these cute, neatly packaged online programs. They work for a short period of time, but eventually we can't sustain it. And plus, remember, our body will fight that weight loss. He learns that he needs to eat from big to small throughout the day, and that he needs to eat more food, not less. Deprivation is not the answer. And again, it's only going to shut down his body. So he loads up his plate. He eats a couple of servings at breakfast to try and make that his biggest meal of the day. He tapers off so that dinner becomes his smallest meal off a bread and butter sized plate or a rice sized bowl with unlimited salad and vegetables at every meal. And he sits down at the dinner table and he uses something, a utensil that he's uncomfortable with. Could be an oyster fork, a teaspoon, or some chopsticks, to ensure that he's allowing time for those signals to be sent from his stomach to his brain to tell him that he's full. So by reorienting his food intake from big to small, he finds that over time, his appetite hormones start to change. He's starting to notice a reduction in his food intake or food appetite at the end of the day because he started to put more food at the start of the day. Dinner still is the most important meal for him from a social and cultural perspective, but it becomes the least important from a portion size perspective. Goes through that motion, small meal, wakes up feeling hungry, big, small, throughout the day. And he loads up every plate with a carbohydrate, whole grain carb, a protein, and a fat. And that the carbs aren't the cause of his weight problems. They're the very foods that help him with his weight loss journey, providing he's reaching for the whole grains, the ones that are packed full of fibre and nutrition, fill us up for long periods of time, help with weight loss, and importantly, prevent disease like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. The other thing that he's always been very good with in the past is following these strict militant exercise programs. But eventually he gets bored of it, but he also gets injured because it's not sustainable, it's not manageable, and he does sort of over exercise. But he learns that he just needs to monitor his incidental activity. He needs to get a wearable device, whether it's his phone, his watch, see how much he's doing at baseline, slowly increase that over time so that activity becomes part of his day-to-day life. And then so that when he includes exercise, 30 minutes of structured exercise every day, it's forms of exercise that he likes, he enjoys, and he looks forward to. It's in his calendar every day. It's a must. It's not a maybe or a like or a maybe if time permits. It's something that he does every single day. And sometimes, sure, he wants to keep Dr. Nick because he's sweating and puffing and huffing and in pain. But that's when he mixes up the exercise, changes the intensities, particularly during the weight loss months. But in the weight maintenance months, he allows his body to rest. He still continues to move, but he does more non-body weight bearing exercise like the bike and the rower and the pool. And he also reduces the intensity to prevent injury creeping in and also to prevent continual weight loss from occurring. The last part of the puzzle that he masters over time is the evening routine, because typically that's the time when he's sitting down, he's on the couch watching his favourite shows, reaching for his favourite foods, and he's mindlessly eating. He starts to adopt a new routine in the evening time. He still watches his favourite shows, but before bed every night, he partakes in a hobby or he helps the kids with the homework, and he implements this no blue light after twilight. He turns off the phones, the devices, and he allows his body that rest, because all of these devices we're addicted to are telling us it's daytime instead of nighttime. They're suppressing melatonin production and they're not allowing us to get to sleep, and they're also disrupting our sleep throughout the night. So overall, we're getting poorer quality sleep, which affects our lifestyle choices. It makes us more likely to reach for the chocolate and the cheese, because when we're fatigued, we reach for what we think is the easier option. So over time, he masters these 6 principles, these 6 steps to long-term weight loss success. He's using his mobile web app to make himself accountable over time, and he can see the habits forming. He starts with 1 or 2 of them because at the start it's a bit overwhelming, and he slowly masters them. And he also remembers this 66-day rule, which is what evidence and research shows is how long it takes to kick an old habit and form a new, good, positive habit. So it takes more than 2 months. And when you're following IWL, there's sort of 2 things that I want to finish on and leave you with, is that this is not an all or nothing approach. That does not work. This should always feel easy. But the first 3 months are the hardest. Why? Because you need to learn and apply the principles and form new habits. And remember, I told you it's 66 days that we've got to get through. And often we can't implement all 6 principles at once. We might pick 1, 2, or 3. Once we start to master those, we move on to the next. But you don't get to the end of a 4 or an 8 or a 12-week program and then just be left in the lurch. You continue to apply these principles. They become a way of life, so that not only do you reach a realistic goal weight loss, you prevent your body fighting the weight loss so you can stay there, and you also regain control of your health. Now, the second thing is that there is a lot of unlearning an individual needs to do. Years and years and years of picking up all of this misleading information or told all this misleading information takes months, maybe years to unlearn. And that this plan, this resource, this book needs to be your go-to. You need to reread it and reread it. You'll pick up more and more, and hopefully you will then unlearn more and more of that wrong or misleading information that you've been told over the last few months, years, or decades. So there's 2 things you need to think of. Remember, this is not the all or nothing. Patience is required, and particularly in the first few months of learning these principles, digesting this information in a variety of means, and slowly applying them over time. And then the second thing is you've got to unlearn. It takes time to unlearn that other information that you've picked up, and to trust in these principles and these steps, which will eventually become a way of life. Now, again, I can only touch on these lightly in this talk, but there is so much more in the books on each of these principles, and that's why I say start with the Interval Weight Loss for Women book, because that is the one that tackles all of these in greater detail. Then you can make your way back through the other books, particularly if you don't have, or you want to read up more on the program, more on the science. And you can also digest a lot of this information online through various videos and other reading materials. So I hope that's given everyone an understanding of my work, the science behind weight loss and obesity, and why it is so challenging and complex. This is not as simple as, a celebrity telling you to eat less and move more. That doesn't work. It's going to see you in a worse off position long term, not only physically but mentally. So stop buying into that dieting industry, and then understand the principles of a healthy lifestyle. Because if you do that, you will regain control of your weight. And importantly, remember, this is all about health and prevention of lifestyle disease, because that is the most important thing. Without our health, we have nothing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. That was really insightful.
Thank you.
Let's start with some questions. Let's check and see if we have any questions.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And I'll just say,
here.
I was just going to say too, often we're a bit shy sometimes to ask questions. You've got plenty of ways of communicating with me after today's session. If you have questions, you can email. But you will probably get a lot of the information too that might be bubbling away in your head in the books.
Okay, let's kick off.
Yes.
I've got a question here. How much do you recommend a day? So I guess they mean how much food would you suggest?
Yep, it's a person doesn't have to worry about calories, because the calories in versus calories out Again, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything. A lot of the calories that you see on labels are inaccurate. A lot of the foods are calories that are in foods we don't digest. Nuts, for example. So we don't digest a lot of the calories from, even though they are high in calories from that particular food. So that's why one of the principles is simply eating big to small. The first meal of the day, as a rough guide, very rough guide as a starting point, will be 3 fistfuls, so closed fists. Okay. Lunch 2, dinner 1. You can have salad and vegetables on top of those, but use that as a very, very rough guide to start with. And then you work out, maybe that was a bit much at breakfast. Maybe it wasn't enough. It depends on your starting body weight as well, and whether you're male or female. It's a good guide that we do see works with many people.
Okay. Now, next question. I'm 70 years old. Is it something I could do as well?
Definitely, you're young. 70 is young. There's so many great years ahead. I mean, what happens when we get older is our body is not as friendly to us. We have mobility issues, limitations, often, relating to exercise. So that's usually the biggest thing that we have with our patients and even people in the community following IW. Well, do things that you can do. So get in a pool or get on an exercise bike in the comfort of your own home, a rowing machine. You can do a lot of sit-stand exercises. So body weight strengthening is very important at that age, but you can do squats off a chair, for example. So there's always a way you can implement it into your current lifestyle.
Yeah, there's so much you can do at home and every day, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's probably the most important part of it, exercise, because when you lose weight, you want to be losing it from predominantly fat stores. Remember, muscle's what we want to hold on to, because that's our determining factor of metabolic rate. That's the thing that revs our engine along when we're sitting there at rest. So exercise will preserve your muscle mass, and in some cases, help you increase it. So that's a very favorable position to be in, because it's going to help you, again, prevent weight regain.
That's correct. And how much exercise would you recommend?
Yeah, so 30 minutes a day, and 2 of the sessions each week should be body weight strengthening. That might be a circuit in your own home. You could be using your own body weight, so body weight squats, push-ups. You might be using cans of food, resistance bands, or you might be using weights. The body strengthening is also, it's a way of mixing up your week, but it is good for our bone mineral density. And whenever you don't want to go out and exercise, you have to think that door is just a barrier. And the minute I start exercising, I will feel good. Those feel-good chemicals, endorphins in your brain, will start to be released, not only during the exercise, but for many hours afterwards.
Yeah, and that's so true. When you go out and have a walk and you get back, you feel like a completely different person, don't you?
You
do.
It
just really helps. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, I have another question. It's about Diet Coke. Does it increase insulin levels? Can you still have Diet Coke and trick the brain to not feel hungry?
Yeah, this is a good question. So there was a good paper that came out. You'll see this if you're on Facebook, you'll see this on the Facebook page. It was actually one of our recent posts. A peer-reviewed paper came out looking at Diet Coke or diet soft drinks versus regular soft drinks, and also, unsweetened beverages like water. And they showed that the diet and the unsweetened both resulted in the same amount of weight loss and fat mass, which was promising. So I guess the first point is that if you're on, full regular Coke or regular soft drink, wean yourself down to the diet variety, the sugar-free variety, because it's still going to help you with weight loss. And the second finding was it didn't have any detrimental effect on biochemical parameters like their cholesterol, and it didn't also have an effect on appetite markers. Look, they did show some suggestion that you probably eventually want to wean from the Diet Coke to the unsweetened beverages, but it's all about the quantities as well. So I think the first point is move yourself from regular to diet, eventually to unsweetened. If you're drinking a lot of diet diet, soft drink at the moment. It's fine. The papers are showing that it's not necessarily detrimental, which is good. But you got to remember you're getting a lot of other things from it. So Coke will give you caffeine. So yeah, you want to wean it down over time. And if you're on, say, 6 bottles, you might get down to 3 and eventually 2.
Okay, that's a really good tip. There's probably a lot of people watching that do drink diet drinks, and just knowing that is really useful.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. How do you factor in perimenopause and menopause?
Yes, these questions actually. There's another article on the conversation I wrote and on the Facebook page about the challenges with menopause. So perimenopause is this period before, where we're starting to notice some side effects or changes in our body.
So what age is that, Nick? When does that sort of start?
Yeah, 46 is often the sort of kick-in period. Might go to 52. Can last quite a long period of time. It does vary enormously for each individual. This is just the averages. But that's when you start to notice your body working differently. And then, you go through this menopausal period until you're postmenopausal. And that is when you go 12 months without a menstrual period. Now, what is happening during that time is we often like to blame our hormones. So even for males, as we age, we get a reduction in testosterone. But for females during this time, they're seeing a reduction in estrogen. It's a very small amount. Now, what is the real factor going on is that with age, we're actually not leading as healthy a lifestyle. We're not moving as much. We're still having the same volume of food, but our physical activity is going down, hence our weight goes up. So the real reason you're putting on weight during menopause, perimenopause, menopause, is due to a change in your lifestyle. So you really need to work hard on your exercise. And sure, hormones play a role, but it is a small role when you look at the overall picture.
Okay.
So how do you combat that? You combat it by applying the 6 principles.
Okay, that was a good question.
Very.
Okay, next question. From a neuroscience perspective, how can you trick your brain not to eat snacks or sweets?
Yeah, so you can. It's a very fascinating piece of, I guess, research and work we do. I touched on this lightly, but you can retrain your brain. So this neuroplasticity exists in the brain, and you can change the wiring. That hard wiring we talk about is in fact soft wiring. So what you've got to do is repeatedly apply positive choices. If you keep doing that, the neuron connectivity will change, and those positive, healthier choices become the default. The second thing is I mentioned that those foods that we often avoid because they're not as appealing, well, they give us the same feel-good response. So I'll give you an example. Some fruit with 100% nut butter on it. You've got a source of fat and you've got a source of natural sugar. That'll give you the identical feel-good response, feel-good high from food in the brain compared to a processed or fast food high in sugar and fat. So that's what you need to think about. And that's what our ancestors used to get the high from, the nature's treats. So the last part of that is that principle, reach for nature first. That's how you keep retraining, reach for nature first.
Okay. Next question.
And surround yourself with the nature's treats too. Sorry, Lou.
Go for it. Next question. I'm not a breakfast person. How do I tailor that in? And I find that too. I wake up, I'm just not hungry. I just don't feel like eating. What do you recommend, or what do you suggest?
Good question. Guess what? We're all not breakfast people. You know why? Because we've wired ourselves that way. We've wired ourselves to run out the door, grab a coffee, maybe we have a little bit of lunch, and then guess what? Our appetite, ghrelin levels go up in the afternoon. We overeat, we overindulge, and we reach for anything we can get our hands on. We've got it the complete wrong way around in this Western developed world. We have to be getting up, having breakfast, having lunch, having dinner. and having small regular meals, because that then prevents your appetite increasing and prevents you from making the poorer choices. Now, the other part you say is that you're not hungry. That's very, very
Mm.
true. You won't be hungry. But over time, 66 days plus, you will
Mhm.
start to notice your hunger go up in the morning. You'll start to wake up feeling hungry and you'll start to
Mhm.
go, oh, okay, I get it. But that's only going to happen if, remember, you're tapering off and dinner becomes your smallest meal of the day.
Okay.
At
So
the
it has to
moment,
be
it's
the
our biggest
smallest meal.
meal. Has to be. At the moment, it's our
Yep.
biggest. We're waking up, we're not hungry. And I tell you, you introduce breakfast, you're still
Mhm.
going to be wanting to scream at me in a few weeks because your appetite hormone's not changing, but it will change. You just have to keep persisting with it. And over time, you're going to start waking up and feeling ravenous.
Okay. Good tip. Next question. Since having kids, I've put on over 45 kilos and now I'm over 104 kilos. I'm concerned how long this will take to lose. What can you suggest, or what would be your approach?
Well, so, if someone's got 40 kilos, typically that person will lose that 40 kilos over uh, 3.5, 4 years on IWL, just
Mhm.
depending on how picture perfect the weight loss trajectory is. Now, the thing is, we can put that person on a drastic diet and get them to
Mhm.
lose that 40 kilos much quicker, within 6 months.
Okay.
But guess what?
Okay.
We know, we follow them up in our clinics and they've put on 41, 42, 43 kilos,
Mm.
not always straight away, but a few years down the track, and they're ending up in a worse off position. So
Mm.
you're still, this person, they've got have 3 kids, I think you said that, you've got a big family, you've got many great years ahead, but you've got to now focus on the long term picture. You've got to regain
Mm.
control of your health and weight now, and think that if you do go and follow something else that gives you a quicker response, you're only going to end up
Mhm.
in a worse off position. Science has proven that time and time again, but the dieting industry will continue to sell you something else.
Yeah. Yeah. That you just can't do it quickly. It's just not
Your
easy.
body's just going to fight.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is,
Okay.
it's not, if you think about it, the way to break it down is to say, okay, in a year's time, I'm going to be 12 kilos lighter. You'll
Mm.
actually notice a huge improvement in your bodily functioning, the way you feel, your vitality, your health will have improved significantly. You'll get to there, and sometimes people go, wow, that was all I needed to lose, 10 kilos. But then they do often want to keep going on. But that's what you have to break it down into sort of milestones along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easier, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, next question. Where do type 1 diabetics fit into this model for dieting?
Yeah, so this is a very challenging autoimmune um, disease where you're required to take insulin every day. But again, the same principles still apply. But what you do need to do is work very closely with your endocrinologist, because as you gradually lose weight, you might have to fluctuate. Sorry, adjust your insulin injections, because if you are
Mhm.
overdosing, that is an anabolic um, hormone, which does mean it promotes weight gain. So it's all about, as you're losing weight with IWL, you keep working with your primary healthcare provider, your specialist, your endocrinologist, to ensure that you're not having too much insulin, because it's a very fine line. It's all about the dosaging with each meal,
Okay.
and making sure your
Next,
meals are balanced too. Like I was mentioning, carb,
yeah,
protein, fat every meal.
yep, yep, just incorporating all those in
All
each
of the
meal.
macros. Yeah, they always should be balanced, and then it makes it easier for you knowing what your
Mhm.
blood sugar levels will do.
Okay, next question. Your view on Michael Mosley's 5-2 diet. That's really popular. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's very popular because of mainstream media. But sadly, there's so many peer-reviewed studies on this that it's achieving the same response. It's down and people go back up. Maybe they're
Mm.
not back up there in a couple of months, but could be a couple of years. Could be a year, but they're ending up regaining the weight. So from a health perspective, fasting is obviously good, but that's for people in the normal weight range. Remember, 2 in 3 people are now struggling with their weight. And fasting's good from a health perspective if you're in a normal healthy weight range, because our ancestors would often go long periods of time without food.
Yeah. Yeah, we're mimicking that, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not the answer for weight loss. You're just going to get the same
No.
U-shaped response. Every
Yeah.
paper has shown that.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Does the book prescribe what food to eat and when?
Yeah, so the prescription is based on, remember, the time of the day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, having snacks, eating regularly, preventing hunger creeping in. You can use the rough guide of 3 fists, 2 fists, 1 fist. And when, well, you tailor it around that your day. So an IWL plan for a mum with 3 kids is going to look a lot different to a corporate lawyer that's, leading long work hours in the city.
Mm-hmm.
You still apply the principles and you work it into your day-to-day life. But if you're running out the door with 3 kids under the arm, well, you've got to have something with you as you go out the door.
So even having some snacks with you,
Definitely.
like the nuts and...
Definitely. You should food shop once a week at minimum. So that's a good point you raise. Like, even if you're running out the door with some nuts and some fruit, those nature's treats, well, that's much better than, ending up skipping that meal and then reaching for the comfort food from the drive-through or the vending machine.
Yeah. And also on that, it's really hard to find what's healthy to snack on. I was just eating some chickpea veggie chips the other day. Third ingredient was sugar. What's the best thing that you could pick up and eat as a snack?
Yeah, it's a really hard field to navigate, isn't it?
Everything has sugar in it.
Yeah, or think of anything that's in a packet processed as high in often, like you mentioned, sugar, salt, fat, palatability, also preservation of the food. So that's the same when you go and eat in a restaurant, takeaway. The restaurant is doing all it can to make that food taste good, get you back there. So if you cook the same meal at home, it would be, a lot less calories, but a lot more healthy. So I guess what you've got to think of is, when you're having something out of a packet that has a plethora of ingredients on it, it is processed. It's not going to fill you up for long periods of time. Whereas a food that's in its natural raw state, like our fruits and our nuts and our dairy, all these things that, often we think are fat promoting, well, they're the foods that are high in fiber. They do fill us up for long periods of time because they're packed with nutrition. So you've got to have a lot of these nature's treats around you. A good snack sometimes is just toast with avocado on it, or chopped up fruit with some 100% nut butter. That's just as easy as buying the muesli bar.
Yeah, and just as tasty, if not tastier.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, how did Indigenous people eat historically, i.e. 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch or dinner? Do you, give some insight?
Yeah, this is a good question. Again, it's the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So they would forage for what was available, and it wasn't a set prescription because they didn't always know when they were eating. And it really does depend on what moment in history we're looking at. But I think, broadly speaking, this is a good question because we're talking about, hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and often gorging when food was available, and that, which is allowing our body to store food. But they're leading very active lifestyles as well while they're hunting for that food. So it's a completely different lifestyle, same gene in a different environment.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Okay, we're just about 8 o'clock. One lucky last question. What do you mean by 3 fistfuls at breakfast? Protein or a mix of protein and carb? What do you recommend?
For instance, you would have a mix of your whole grain carb, your protein and your fats source. So your breakfast might be some eggs, which is your protein source, You might have some whole grain bread, which is another fistful. Then you might have some avocado and some sautéed vegetables for your fat and vegetable serve. So then you're getting your balance, you're also making it a big, nutritious meal for that start of the day. And that's not necessarily something, everyone can do when they first kick off, because they've got to have something small or allow for their appetite to start to go up over time.
Okay. I think that wraps it up for tonight. Thank you so much, Nick. It's been a real pleasure listening to you speak and hearing about how we can improve our lifestyle and diets.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It was lovely. Thank you. Thanks for everyone attending. Thanks, Steve, for handling our tech. That was fantastic, and keeping us on the air tonight. We hope to see you all again at one of our next events. Don't forget the poll, which Steve will put up now. Good night and keep safe.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.